OK. Alors, bonjour à tous et bienvenue à ce webinaire portant sur les tendances et les opportunités du secteur FinTech de Hong Kong, organisé par Investissement Québec International, l'Association commerciale Hong Kong-Canada et Invest Hong Kong. Mon nom est Julie Coulombe et je suis conseillère spécialisée en affaires internationales chez Investissement Québec International à la direction des marchés Asie-Pacifique et Océanie. Je suis très heureuse d'avoir aujourd'hui avec nous des experts du secteur FinTech de Hong Kong, du Consulat général du Canada de Hong Kong, d'Invest Hong Kong et d'Amino Capital pour vous présenter un survol de l'écosystème, des occasions d'affaires et des opportunités de financement à considérer à Hong Kong. Le webinaire d'aujourd'hui comprendra une série de présentations et sera suivi d'un panel de discussion. Nous vous invitons à soumettre vos questions via la section Q&A de la plateforme. Le webinaire se déroulera en français et en anglais. Avant d'entrer dans le cœur du sujet, permettez-moi de vous présenter brièvement les services d'Investissement Québec International. Ça ne devrait pas être très long. Alors voilà. Donc, Investissement Québec International, qui sommes-nous? Nous sommes un regroupement de ressources dédiées à l'exportation qui accompagne les PME et les grandes entreprises du Québec qui souhaitent accélérer leur démarche de développement des marchés à l'extérieur du Québec. Donc, nous sommes une équipe d'une centaine d'experts basés à Montréal et à Québec, ainsi que dans les bureaux du Québec à l'étranger, à offrir des services d'aide à l'exportation. Vous avez ici le réseau économique du Québec à l'étranger qui comprend plus de 33 représentations un peu partout à travers le monde avec de plus fortes concentrations de bureaux du Québec, là, comme vous pouvez le voir, en Amérique du Nord, en Europe et en Asie. Pour ce qui est de Hong Kong, nous avons un bureau d'immigration à Hong Kong et une antenne économique à Shenzhen qui couvre le territoire hongkongais. On travaille également en collaboration avec le Consulat général du Canada à Hong Kong pour répondre aux besoins, aux demandes des entreprises. Donc, Investissement Québec International offre principalement deux formes d'accompagnement aux entreprises, soit des suivis individualisés et des activités de groupe. Donc, lorsqu'on parle d'un suivi individualisé, on parle d'un accompagnement d'une entreprise selon ses propres besoins à elle. Donc, cela peut être la transmission de conseils sur la culture d'affaires d'un pays, par exemple, jusqu'à l'identification d'occasions d'affaires ou de contacts d'affaires, et ça peut aller jusqu'à l'organisation d'une mission commerciale individuelle. Lorsqu'on parle d'activités de groupe, et on en fait plusieurs chez Investissement Québec International, ça peut être des webinaires sur des marchés comme celui auquel vous participez aujourd'hui, des accueils d'acheteurs et des missions commerciales, incluant des missions commerciales virtuelles. Vous avez ici les noms et coordonnées des conseillers d'Investissement Québec International responsables du secteur des technologies. Donc, si jamais vous souhaitez avoir recours à nos services, je vous encourage à communiquer directement avec la conseillère qui est responsable du territoire que vous visez. Alors, voilà. Je vais maintenant céder la parole à Christopher Chen, qui est Head of Investment Promotion at Invest Hong Kong, pour sa présentation.
Thank you, Julie. Bonjour, everybody. My name is Christopher Chen, Head of InvestHK for Canada, effectively operating as the Trade Consul for the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. My presentation today will be on the fundraising opportunities for fintechs in Hong Kong. So I'd like to begin this presentation with a short introduction as to why Hong Kong. Most of you may or may not have heard of the significance of Hong Kong as a financial capital, but hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll become fairly familiar with what we have to offer. For those of you who do not know much about Hong Kong is one of the world's top capital markets. It is ranked third in the world after New York and London. It is one of the easiest places to do businesses in the world. It takes about 1.5 days to start a business in Hong Kong. It has one of the most lenient tax regimes in the world. In fact, it has the world's lowest tax jurisdiction with a cap of about 18% at the highest bracket. It is one of the most judicially independent areas of the world and has one of the cleanest governances of any territories in the world. It is, simply put, a great place to conduct business and the hub for any company wishing to enter the Asia Pacific. Many of you may already have known everything on the previous slide, but many of you probably would not know about this slide. Hong Kong is now part of a larger ecosystem. It is part of an area called the Greater Bay Area, which is basically Hong Kong blended with Guangdong province of China, which has roughly a total population of 70 million people, effectively making it a super economic region. Think of like the Ruhr Valley in Germany or Silicon Valley in United States, basically a conglomeration of a number of cities, all contributing to the growth and marketability of an economic super region, with a GDP of about $1.5 trillion US dollars, on par with an entire nation such as the Netherlands or Turkey. By history, Hong Kong is a financial capital. There used to be a great saying back in the 60s and 70s, as soon as you come off the airplane and landed at Hong Kong airport, you would have a special smell in the air, and that smell was money. Hong Kong remains one of the world's largest equity fundraising center. It's the third largest bond center in Asia, Japan. What this has done is it has created a legacy of a lot of assets, of a lot of equity sitting in Hong Kong, along with a lot of financial expertise. That amount of capital, with that amount of specialization and investment, has led Hong Kong to become a center of innovation in the 21st century. Simply put, that money now has to be invested somewhere. So what it has done is it's created an environment of new opportunities. FinTech is one of the big pillars of Hong Kong's strategic initiatives, along with life sciences and asset management being the other two major pillars. But FinTech, first and foremost, leverages Hong Kong's strategic and historical bench strengths. This has taken the form of something called the Innovation Technology Commission. This has been spearheaded. This is a creation of the Hong Kong government. This commission has led to the creation of the Innovation Technology Fund, which is a US $13 billion effectively government-run VC pot run by the Hong Kong government, dispersed by multiple agencies and bureaus of the Hong Kong government, doled out to companies in specific sectors, from startups to fintechs to life sciences. I'm not going to go through all the little details around this wheel. Anybody who wants to have a copy of this presentation, feel free to shoot me an email at the end. But needless to say is that this fund is dispersed to companies that are inbound, going into Hong Kong within innovation and technology. And FinTech is one of the core pillars of innovation technology for Hong Kong. This has led to a huge pipeline of startup investments. The number of startups in Hong Kong, as well as our operations, has grown dramatically over the last 6 years. The amount of startups as of beginning of 2020 was roughly about 3,500. This started from 2014 was only about 1,000. The amount of employees has grown by a factor of 6 since that same time period. This is a direct result of the amount of emphasis Hong Kong has put towards startups. And remember, I was talking about the Greater Bay Area. The Greater Bay Area has unparalleled access to investment opportunities. They have by being in Hong Kong, you have access to Chinese capital, Chinese private equity. And the reason for that is that outgoing Chinese capital from China going to the outside world, 60% of that is funneled through Hong Kong. And the same goes the other way. So the amount of financial expertise, the amount of Chinese capital located in Hong Kong is a unique selling point that is not found anywhere else in the world. If you want to be in a place ruled by law with full intellectual property protection yet you want access to the mainland Chinese market and capitalization, Hong Kong is the place to be. Net result is the number of unicorns in the Greater Bay Area is now roughly 28. There might be 29 right now, but as of 2019, there are 28 unicorns. Unicorns being companies with at least $1 billion valuations, startup companies with at least 1 billion US valuations. So what is the fintech opportunity? You know, we recognize that the companies that have tuned in today are of fintech background. So what is the specific opportunity? The ecosystem today has leveraged Hong Kong's financial services background into a vibrant mini economy or mini marketplace of fintechs. There are now 600 plus fintech companies in Hong Kong. 53% of it see Hong Kong as a base for global expansion. 51% of companies operating or plan to expand in the Greater Bay Area. And we actually have government support and funding for companies that wish to land in Hong Kong and branch out both in the Greater Bay Area into mainland China, Southeast Asia. We actually do provide financial support as well as expertise. 76% of the fintech companies focus on the B2B market. That's understandable when you see the amount of financial services companies that are located in Hong Kong. And 37% of fintech founders came from overseas. And that's very important for companies from Quebec to realize is that not all of these companies are homegrown. 37% are actually companies that started in another country and decided to put a branch office, whether it's sales and marketing, investor relations, R&D, software development. They put them in Hong Kong. 37% of them are actually run by non-locals. In terms of the financial services opportunities in Hong Kong, the numbers sort of speak for themselves. In terms of asset wealth management, there's 747 firms in Hong Kong. In terms of banking, there's 160 plus licensed banks. There's 8 virtual banks. The virtual banks are new. Basically, Hong Kong has liberalized its granting of virtual bank licenses. And this has led to almost an average of 2 new virtual banks launching per year. Digital payments, there are more than 100 digital payment companies. In terms of insurance, I just need to go back to banking. If you look at the concept that there's 160 licensed banks in Hong Kong, when you compare that to the entirety of Canada, how many licensed banks are there in Canada? This is basically like a 10-fold difference of basically the liberalization and the capacity for banking presence in Hong Kong, which isn't just conducting business operations in Hong Kong. It's throughout all of Asia Pacific. Hong Kong is the starting hub for the rest of Asia Pacific. Insurance companies, 162 insurance companies, 2 are virtual. 160 insurance companies. Actually, it's about the same as Canada. However, if you look at the scale of population and the scale of market, it's actually, you can tell there's a heavy concentration of insurance companies in Hong Kong. In terms of small to medium-sized enterprises, the mid-market, there's about 340,000 SMEs. This is, of course, inclusive of startups. Those that focus exclusively on import and export, there are more than 100,000. Bearing in mind that Hong Kong has a population of anywhere between 6.5 to 7 million, I think 7 million actually. So if you think about the amount of commercial activity that's going in such a concentrated area is why Hong Kong is ranked so highly in the financial markets. Now, this page, again, I think a vast multitude of you will find interesting, and this is the funding sources, Hong Kong government schemes relevant to fintech. I think there are a number of programs that help fintech companies, whatever part of the scale-up funnel they may be taking part in. Beginning stage, there's a waiver of the business registration fee. That's just, when you're starting. In the growth stage, at the research and development stage, there are a number of schemes that help out fintech firms regardless of what type of fintech companies they may be, whether you're insurtech, regtech, wealth tech, payments. I mean, if you're involved in the research and development cycle of the startup funnel, of the scale-up funnel, there are government disbursements to be had, whether they are dispersed by us as InvestHK or by the Insurance Authority, which is the licensing body for the insurance industry, the SFC, the Securities and Futures Commission for those dealing in equities, the Monetary Authority, which is the equivalent of the Canadian Monetary Authority, effectively. There are compliance sandboxes run by the government. Each one is an agent of disbursement for government funds. And this is only government. We're only talking about the public sector. We're not talking about the private sector. In terms of hiring, we will cover hiring. We will cover 1 to 2 employees of companies that are building themselves in Hong Kong. In terms of business development, we offer vouchers. Fundraising, we offer, that's a direct tap into the Innovation Technology Venture Fund. And then the interesting one is that in terms of overseas expansion, for those who wish to expand out of Hong Kong, again, we offer support. Now, this is only government schemes relevant to fintech. There are actually plenty more government schemes relevant to startups that are not actually listed here, but these are the ones that are relevant to fintech. So even if you are a fintech, if you qualify as a startup, you're actually eligible for more avenues of funding, depending upon which government bureau you may choose to tap into. And you may actually be able to tap into multiple government bureaus at the same time. Now, that was public funding. In terms of private funding, I think Sue Shu from Amino Capital, who's one of our panelists, may be able to shed some light as to what the venture capital outlook, investment environment may look like. Needless to say, it's huge. There is not only Hong Kong-based VC firms and VC networks, there are also mainland Chinese VC firms and networks that have the potential to be tapped into. And InvestHK is always happy to facilitate those meetings, if not done directly by the firms themselves. One note I want to bring up is the Hong Kong stock market is the most buoyant in the world. Basically, over the last 10 years, we've ranked #1 in terms of total IPO fundraised. In terms of fundraised specifically for fintechs, raised US $10 billion. This is an extremely active and healthy market. There are always forces at work that ebb and flow the equities market, but over the last several years, Hong Kong has basically seen a net growth for any companies willing to have an exit strategy launch in the most positive way. In terms of the top motivations to expand the GBA, first and foremost is access to a larger market. Few companies go into Hong Kong thinking, I'm going to launch a business in Hong Kong and I'm just going to stay there. Suffice to say, almost nobody says that. Basically, everybody who goes into Hong Kong thinks Hong Kong is a market that's stable, offers intellectual property protection, offers basic law, great lifestyle, a diverse, cosmopolitan, and well-educated talent pool, but it gives me access to the rest of Asia and mainland China, and that's important. Strategically and geographically located in the middle of Asia, it is the starting point to reach both Southeast Asia and North Asia. That is an undisputed fact. So last couple slides. Who is InvestHK? Who are we? Realized I probably could have put this at the beginning, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands the benefits of investing in Hong Kong. we like to say that we connect the dot and plug you into our ecosystem. We are actually a government agency of the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau of the Hong Kong government. Our specific task is to get Canadian companies, Quebec companies into Hong Kong. Now, to get a company into Hong Kong and register you and do the minutes from corporation, honestly speaking, anyone can do that. Our true value add is actually the facilitation and introduction of introducing you to partners and customers and clients so that you do well. We want every company that goes into Hong Kong to do well and perform well and survive a fairly competitive marketplace. Hong Kong is capitalistic. It is very competitive. In order to survive, you must be running when you hit the ground. So we will introduce you to investors. We will introduce you to banks, to associations, multipliers, accelerators, universities for talent pool. We will introduce you to other government agencies that will help you craft new R&D strategies, new collaborations. Again, it doesn't take, anyone can introduce you to a law firm or an accounting firm or a corporate secretary to do your registration and corporation. Any company can do that, but to facilitate the introductions to corporates, governments, investors, that's our value add. By coming in with InvestHK, you come in under government auspices. You've automatically got the door open for you. We will also introduce you to the Canadian Trade Commission. We do that at par for the course. It's best to have two governments working for you rather than one. That's our belief. And it's no coincidence that the Canadian Trade Commission actually will share a bit of information about themselves. Running out of time, but the last slide is a little bit about past Canadian InvestHK clients. There are approximately about 200 Canadian companies in Hong Kong. InvestHK put 180 of them there. The only companies that we didn't put in there are the ones that were existing prior to InvestHK's existence, namely, like, for example, RBC or Manulife or Manuvie in Quebec. But having said that, those companies came back to us for departmental expansion or for consultations with the Hong Kong government. The reason being is that InvestHK is the gateway for any company wishing to expand or grow in Hong Kong. If they need to talk to the government, they come to us first because we basically, we just facilitate those meetings with other government officials because, for example, if you're RBC, you don't actually know who to talk to. We do. We will facilitate that meeting. So I think that's it for me. I've run out of time, and that was my last slide. So at this stage, I'd like to bring up the Canadian Trade Commission, one of the organizations that we work with. I'd like to introduce Richard Fong. He's a trade commissioner stationed in Hong Kong. He is part of the Consulate General of Canada, and his presentation will be how to be a part of the virtual HK FinTech Week. So, Richard.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good afternoon to everyone back in Canada. And I'd like to give special thanks, first of all, to Invest Quebec, as well as Invest Hong Kong for inviting us to today's panel. Today, my name is Richard Fong from the Canadian Consulate in Hong Kong, and I run the Canadian Tech Accelerator here in Hong Kong. So I just want to give my slides, give a presentation on how you can be part of Hong Kong FinTech Week 2020 this year virtually. Give me a sec. Perfect. So a little bit about the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service for those who don't know about our services. We're part of Global Affairs Canada, a group of business development professionals located in Canadian embassies and consulates abroad to support Canadian businesses' international expansions, helping with sales, exports, finding local partners, regulatory, investment, etc. We're divided up in different sectors. So I look at FinTech. I also look at property tech, prop tech, but then we have other colleagues around the world, including in Hong Kong, looking at agri-food, education, aerospace, life sciences, to provide that specific industry expertise. We also have a regional office in Montreal. I know that most of you, or if not all of you, are connected with Invest Quebec, but we also, at the Trade Commissioner Service, we also have a regional office in Montreal, in case you didn't know. So a little bit about the Canadian Tech Accelerator. So it's actually not a new initiative specifically in general. We've been actually running for a decade. We first started off in Silicon Valley and then expanded into the United States. But then as that grew to be successful, we've recently expanded to Asia. So this is a new initiative in Asia specifically to help Canadian technology companies to grow and expand, with really the hopes of having Canadian tech companies grow to become globally competitive companies. That's really why we're here and what our function is. So why fintech in Hong Kong? As Chris alluded to earlier in this presentation, Hong Kong is a premier financial hub in Asia, with many of the largest financial institutions having their regional headquarters or headquarters based here in Hong Kong. So fintech is one of our major focuses in Hong Kong for the Hong Kong CTA. So as I mentioned, we focus quite a bit in fintech, specifically for the CTA here in Hong Kong. We work with, I think we cover most of the big financial institutions here in Hong Kong, the ones that are interested and want to work with startups or fintechs in the ecosystem. So anyone ranging from JP Morgan to more local banks like Hang Seng, Convoy, then also some of the regional banks like DBS, but then also covering some of the insurance players like Prudential, AIA, AXA, who all have their regional headquarters here in Asia, in Hong Kong. We also look at the venture capital space as well. We know that fintechs are always looking to grow using venture capital, so we cover also the VCs here in Hong Kong as well as in the region. So we work quite closely with the big corporate FIs as well as investors here in Hong Kong, so we can provide value to fintechs like yourselves. So here's a slide, really a snapshot of some of the companies that we've been working with. So we've been introducing a lot of the Canadian Canadian fintechs to some of the larger FIs. So here's just a few examples that we've been working with in the past. We've been working with quite a few in recent months as well. So today's presentation is really about this. For Hong Kong FinTech Week is coming up in November, and unfortunately, due to the COVID situation right now, it's going to be purely virtual this year. So we're looking to give out 10 tickets to Canadian fintechs. So each of the fintechs will get 5 passes for team members on your team, and it's on an application basis. So you just need to apply to this program, our Canadian Technology Accelerator program, in the link below, tradecommissioner.gc.ca/CTA-ATC. And then once you apply, we'll review your application, and if you are a suitable match, we'll provide links to passes, which should be ready in October according to organizers. So what you'll get out of the virtual Hong Kong FinTech Week this year is live streams for playback content, given the time zone issues, in-app matchmaking with potential investors and clients, company profile on the platform, networking via video calls, etc., etc. And alongside participation for Hong Kong FinTech Week, us here at the Hong Kong CTA will also provide bespoke services for Canadian fintechs to do matchmaking, whether you're looking for investor introductions or you're looking for introductions to corporates. We'll basically tailor to what you're looking for, what you need for Hong Kong FinTech Week. So we're very glad to provide the additional support alongside what Hong Kong FinTech Week has to offer. So some of the selection criteria that we have, these are ideally what we'd like to see. Already have some traction with some clients, be it in Canada or United States, Europe, elsewhere in Asia, Latin America, these areas, or have raised a round of institutional funding in the regions that I just mentioned. So it was a short presentation. I only had 5 minutes, so please feel free to email me if you have any questions. My email is above, and look forward to chatting with you more. So with that, I want to turn it back to Julie from Invest Quebec, and she'll introduce the panel for tonight, for this afternoon actually, for you folks.
Oui, alors merci beaucoup à Christopher et à Richard pour leur présentation. Effectivement, on va passer au deuxième segment du webinaire, soit le panel de discussion. Donc, le panel va porter sur les tendances et les opportunités du secteur FinTech à Hong Kong. Les panélistes seront Michael Kaczmarski, qui est Senior Manager FinTech at Invest Hong Kong, Sue Xu d'Amino Capital, qui est Managing Partner à Amino Capital, et Richard Fong, qui est délégué commercial au Consulat général du Canada à Hong Kong. Le panel de discussion sera modéré par Christopher Chen, et on vous encourage à poser vos questions dans la section Q&A de la plateforme. Merci. Chris, I give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. So one of the first questions that came in is a pointed one, and this is basically what FinTech technologies are currently in demand in Hong Kong/Asia. Are there any FinTech technologies that VCs are particularly interested in? So, Michael, do you want to take a first stab at it? Or Sue, would you like to take a first stab? Or Richard? Don't forget, you guys are on mute.
So maybe I'll be happy to maybe give a couple of words from our perspective. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me well? Since this is the first time I'm speaking this. Can you hear me well? Yeah. As a part of the FinTech team at Invest Hong Kong, we are geographically dispersed team. We have a team of 10 in Hong Kong, and we have me sitting in San Francisco and a colleague sitting in London. And we've been constantly looking at what companies are coming to us, but also what companies actually end up setting up in Hong Kong, and what companies find success talking to business partners. And definitely because 2020 is such a strange year and so many shifts happen in all kinds of sectors. In FinTech as well, we could see the shift, specifically companies that are doing right now well, and this is not going to be a huge discovery, but all the companies that help banks and financial institutions to switch to working remotely. Also, all the technologies that help with touchless payments, as well as companies that help with just in general being able to run operations for dispersed teams, especially within the banking sector. And apart from that, and then maybe Sue will be able to expand on that more. But overall, regardless of what technology company offers, right now the first question, especially coming from banks and insurance companies, is how is this pandemics related or COVID related? So in other words, why we should look at your product right now and not, let's say, a year from now when hopefully things will be more predictable. And so we've seen a lot of companies kind of switching their pitch decks and adapting them to showcase how their product can be used right now. So these are the kind of big picture trends that we see as a FinTech team within Invest Hong Kong.
I don't know. Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you, Richard. Christopher and Nicole, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. And Amino, we have been around for 8 years. We're a venture firm based in Palo Alto, and we focus on seed and growth stage companies in big data and data-driven technologies. And today, we actually invested over 160 companies, and including Chime Bank, which is one of the most important challenger bank in the U.S. And we were their seed money, almost the first check. And then they, before pandemic, they already raised over 5.8 billion valuation by DST. And then during pandemic, they actually enjoyed significant growth, because when you look at the, when you compare the challenger bank and the traditional bank, and then the biggest difference is the cost compensation. So for challenger bank, almost all their hiring are engineers. So they move extremely fast. And especially for a lot of the incentive money or the government support money. And so Chime Bank, actually, you just have to push a button and then they submit it for you. And then for a traditional bank, oftentimes it's not just it's not just the government has a certain quota, you have to compete for it, but also the bank actually have to allocate resources, people and paperwork. It's a long process. So sometimes, even though there is still quota, and then people cannot actually get access to their bank, to their banker to get it applied. So for Chime, it was a great opportunity for them. So they just push a button, and then you can get the support money. And so that's the beauty of digital bank and neurobank, and not just Chime Bank. There is in Hong Kong, there is Fusion Bank, and extremely successful, and also WeLab. It was a homegrown Stanford, because we have an incubator next to downtown Palo Alto. So there is a lot of, so we invest a lot of Stanford line. So the founder of WeLab, it's a beautiful story. It's actually a Stanford GSB grad, and it went back to Hong Kong and started the WeLab, and very successful. It's one of the first bank that actually get the license from Hong Kong government. So definitely in Hong Kong, fintech is definitely one of the most important area for people, because Hong Kong government has really, because you want regulation. Sometimes we see you want regulation, because regulation actually drive adoption. So even like challenger bank outside Hong Kong, a lot of them still not a bank. So I have to say, because they don't have the license. So they have to take advantage of the Gov't bank. But in Hong Kong, there is already like a new bank. They got license from the government. So Hong Kong government moved really fast. So that's why we actually travel between Silicon Valley and Hong Kong. And then I actually originally from China. So it's my nature. So I have to travel between Silicon Valley and Hong Kong. And our office in Hong Kong covers investment in Southeast Asia. And then we actually plan to enhance our deal flow from Southeast Asia through Hong Kong. And also Hong Kong provide our portfolio company with liquidity and funding. And for example, our early stage investment, Meituan, the food delivery giant, actually enjoyed price earning ratio of over 300 times. So yeah, so I'm extremely happy to be here.
Thanks. I'll also quickly chime in. I know that there's probably more questions, but I think the questions on VCs in Hong Kong and what they're interested in, I think for Hong Kong, because we here at the CTA, we engage with quite a few fintech investors here in Hong Kong. So we noticed that a lot of the fintech investors here in Hong Kong are looking for more of the later stage companies instead of the really, really early stage fintechs. So definitely, if you have some traction in back in your home market in Canada, or you have some traction in United States or elsewhere, those success stories really work well with some of the big banks here in Hong Kong. As you all know, I'm sure financial institutions are very conservative organizations at heart. So they're definitely trying to de-risk as much as possible from their side. So investors are also looking to have definitely some traction within the startup in order for them to make those investments. But then if you have those, I think you have a pretty good chance here in Hong Kong. On to the question on what kind of technologies, I think it really depends on which bank. So banks like HSBC, StanChart, DBS, those are more on the consumer banking side or commercial banking side. They're looking for technologies in those areas. Whereas say like a JP Morgan or a Morgan Stanley, they're looking for more maybe sales and trading tools or investment banking tools, big corporate banking tools, KYC, AML. Those are of interest to them. And I think one of the bigger trends is also insurance. We're speaking a lot on the banking side, but then also in insurance, they're looking a lot on the health tech area. Anything that can help them process claims faster, especially during the COVID pandemic. I know Michael was talking a little bit about that. Anything COVID or pandemic related, I think those are very of interest. Anything that can process claims faster, can track or monitor health of the clients that they have. Those are probably areas of interest right now, and probably moving forward too. So.
Actually, if I might, I would like to add to Richard's. I could not agree more in terms of the size of the companies. That's what we see as well, is that the companies that are in Hong Kong's sweet spot and find success are companies that are, we call them more scale-ups rather than startups. So companies that already secured some funding from home, already have some track record of success and validated product, because it takes some time to actually score those clients within financial services sector, and as we know, Hong Kong is not the cheapest place to live and operate, so you need to have that runway. And actually, to that end as well, I don't think I mentioned, this hasn't changed, but this is something that is important for companies to know. Hong Kong is particularly attractive for companies that operate in B2B space, and that of course is connected with what Chris showed in his presentation, the fact that there's such a huge number of banks, such a huge number of insurance companies, and
Michael, how's your connection? No. Okay, so let Michael reconnect. I blame that on the wildfires in and around San Francisco. Next question. How did the landscape, especially the fintech landscape, change in Hong Kong as compared to the pre-COVID-19 era? And I think I'll ask Sue and Richard that. Mostly Richard, because you're there right now and you've probably seen the changes upfront and personal.
I think I touched a little bit on that in my earlier response. But I think, like Michael was saying earlier, really switching to some of the more COVID related issues that are plaguing some of the insurance companies. For example, I can speak from experience. Recently, Swiss Re, they were asking us about if they have any Canadian companies, Canadian startups that are looking for processing claims faster, because they've been getting so many claims from either because as they're reinsured, they're getting a lot more claim processing requests, so they need something to move things quicker. But then also on health tech, so another example back in Canada, actually, a recent success story where Pi Health, who was doing digital monitoring and tracking, they recently struck up a partnership with Prudential Asia. This is very recent, I think about a month or two ago. So we see that as a success, not just in Hong Kong, but also a cross-country collaboration between Hong Kong and as well as Canada. So we see definitely a lot of opportunities right now. Even though we're going through a pandemic, but there's also business opportunities that are brewing out.
Yeah, definitely, totally agree. And then COVID actually accelerated the transition to remote and automated fintech services. And then besides the KYC that Richard just mentioned, and there is also like cybersecurity. And prior to COVID, actually those big banks in Hong Kong already struggling to actually keep client data safe. and more clients shift online post-COVID. So this issue increases both in size and priority. So I should say, because Amino's investment theme has been data, so I should say that AI actually, more and more companies are now offering fully digital products and services, not just customer service anymore. So you probably know that a lot of banks used to have, customer service in Philippines, but during COVID, it has to shut down. So a lot of banks actually go to Amazon, they have this, like a chatbot for customer service. So their business actually went up and up. So it also opened up a lot of opportunity for, AI bot and other like really deeply integrated fintech bots companies. So we have seen the inbound requests from the banks, and a lot of the, like the POC has been started before. It's very interesting that banking and fintech actually kind of like take advantage of this, kind of like thrive, not just survived during COVID. And for example, other companies that we have companies that AI company used to work with like Fortune 500 companies, and then they are tech companies, so they actually kind of like talking to the engineering or R&D side of the maybe like Samsung, some other tech giants. However, during COVID, what they heard from the big tech companies that sometimes the whole department got laid off, and sometimes like you heard that the Silicon Valley has big slash of laid off during the last couple months. So, but fintech, they don't have that kind of problem.
Maybe if I might, also one of the opportunities as well is we see a lot of companies take this time to actually gauge the interest of their audience or potential clients. The fact that everything switched to the virtual means that you don't have to travel, you don't have to spend money or time or fight with the jet lag in order to reach out to your clients or potential clients. Same applies to the Hong Kong FinTech Week that Richard mentioned that we promote. Because it's virtual, this year we expect over 20,000 people in attendance. So whether you, like Stu and me, sit in San Francisco or you're based in Montreal, you can just turn on your camera and you can just participate. We do realize that time zone wise, unless you are obsessed with fintech and obsessed with Hong Kong, and you are based in Montreal, you might not participate in real time because it will be in the middle of your night. But we still encourage companies and people to take advantage of the networking platforms. We will have the solution called Deal Flow, which helps with business matching during the conference, and you can do that outside of the kind of business hours of the actual conference. But having said that, and having said that it's easier right now to connect with clients without leaving Montreal or without leaving San Francisco, even if they are based in Hong Kong. A lot of companies that we speak to that are at the initial stages of looking at Asia tell us, okay, so since everything is done virtually now, or everything that is done remote, I planned to have an office in Hong Kong, but now I'm scrapping that idea because I feel that I will be able to sell my product without setting up operations. And we understand that approach because, of course, if you are a startup, you are lean and mean, you don't want to spend or complicate your structure. But from what we see, that doesn't work. So initial conversations with companies, yes, they work, but actually selling a product and being able to sign that contract, for that you have to be geographically located in the same location, especially if your clients are conservative, risk-averse institutions such as financial institutions.
Yeah, I have a very specific question here. I have a company that wants to know specifically, how do fintechs looking for funding engage with VCs or financial partners to commercialize? And do you do pre-seed and seed funding at this stage? So I think that's mostly towards Sue, and Michael can talk about the engagement with VCs or angel investors.
So actually in Hong Kong, there is like almost like 3 different type of money, and there is like family offices, have been setting up shop in Hong Kong, allocating assets into Greater China area. So they are oftentimes limited partners of Sequoia China and other top tier VC invest in China market. And then there is second type of money, which is like the super rich of Hong Kong, and they're exposed to hot deals globally, no matter Canadian companies like Slack or US company like Airbnb. So they want in and they don't mind to be very big investor in very expensive late stage. But there are also third type of early stage focus set of funds and promoting entrepreneurship. So I think you can find them online. So there is like a partnership, kind of like a fund. So I think Hong Kong government select about like 5 different partners, and then they can match 1-to-1 or 1-to-2. So those are definitely designated to actually invest in early stage. And also there is fourth type of the early stage venture firms like So our partners are early Google employee, they joined Google year 2000. They also help Google to go to China. Well, even though Google China left back to Hong Kong, however, there is a lot of really good ex-Googlers starting company in China and also rest of the world. So that's why we actually follow really good entrepreneurs. So in China, as I mentioned, we invest in Mobike and Meituan, and then those were founded by ex-Googlers in China. And also the recent, even though during pandemic and the US-China tension, there is another company called Egg Residential, is also founded by ex-Googler in China. And then he was later became the LinkedIn China head, and he brought a company, I think Eggshell or something, to public in NASDAQ, the first Chinese concept stock in NASDAQ this year. So, so there was a lot of success, and I think so Hong Kong is a very interesting place. It's definitely old school and new school. So for example, when I'm based in downtown Palo Alto most of the time, so I don't need to social anymore because people, if you contact me through LinkedIn and then I found your background interesting and you found my background interesting, we actually, can set up a call and then I actually, maybe we invest in you. And it's very easy to get referral because we have about 80 limited partners in Silicon Valley. They are executives at Facebook, at Amazon, LinkedIn. So it's very easy to check background of those of your company. And then Hong Kong, same thing. Hong Kong, you can get, so I talked to a couple of really good entrepreneurs and important investors in Hong Kong through LinkedIn. So, but in Hong Kong, there's also this old school people, and then they don't mind to actually, they find you interesting. They are this middle person, and then they are bankers, they are governments. So they don't mind to introduce you to their most important trusted partners. If they talk to you, they found you interesting. So even the government, they also do, matchmaking. I recently actually enjoyed one of the matchmaking by the Hong Kong government, and I met some of the very interesting investors and also entrepreneurs. So I think that's more like those people, it's very difficult to actually get referred to if you only use LinkedIn. So because some of them has Chinese background and some of them Chinese family offices, so they don't have LinkedIn. And but Hong Kong is a great place that you have both type of people.
And from our perspective, I would add, we advise companies to, first of all, really consider setting up even a small shop in Hong Kong, even if it's one person tasked with building investor relations. You should do that because Hong Kong is very relationship driven. And as Sue mentioned, you have the new school and old school. So you have people that you can connect on LinkedIn and answer conversations, but you also have the old school, and old school tends to have access to bigger pools of money. The old school that likes meetings, likes to have introductions. And Hong Kong is a small, big city in a sense that if you are based there, if you are somewhere on the Hong Kong island, preferably with an office, I'd say we work in Central or another co-working space in Central, which is the main banking and financial services neighborhood of Hong Kong. Then you have a higher likelihood to actually engage with family offices and with VCs. When it comes to access to governmental funding, One of the vehicles that I see as the most successful based on the four years of working for Invest Hong Kong and working with companies is the funds that are accessible through Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, as the name suggests, focuses on R&D related activities. So if the person asking us a question has intention to do R&D related projects, then Hong Kong Science Park is a good entity, and I'll be happy to make an introduction and see where we can take that. With other types of funding, again, if it's a governmental funding, it is for companies that intend to operate in Hong Kong, like genuinely intend, not just pretend that they want to be in Asia, take money and do something else somewhere else. Companies would intend to be in Hong Kong, and in most cases for companies that are already incorporated and operational to some extent in Hong Kong.
Okay, there are a number of other questions, but we're out of time. So I think at this point, I'd like to thank the three of you for taking part in the panel. What I would like to do is I'd like to share everyone's contacts on this screen via share. For our viewing audience, please feel free to screen cap or write down the contacts, so as you can send each one of us an individual email at your leisure. At this point, I'd like to give it back to Julie, our host, and let her close it up.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to all our speakers for this very interesting discussion, Sue, Chris, Richard, and Michael. Donc, comme vous avez pu le constater là, au fil des présentations, il existe vraiment plusieurs opportunités d'affaires pour les entreprises québécoises du secteur des technologies financières à Hong Kong, mais aussi plusieurs ressources disponibles pour vous aider à mieux comprendre ce marché et à saisir les opportunités. Donc, vous avez ici l'ensemble des coordonnées là, des présentateurs d'aujourd'hui. Donc, je vous invite à nous contacter si vous souhaitez avoir de l'aide pour développer le marché hongkongais. Avant de conclure, je souhaite brièvement vous présenter une dernière ressource disponible que toute entreprise qui souhaite faire affaire avec Hong Kong devrait connaître. Il s'agit de l'association commerciale Hong Kong Canada, qui est d'ailleurs partenaire dans l'organisation de ce webinaire. Donc, c'est une association qui a plus de 200 membres à Montréal et qui organise régulièrement des événements pour informer les gens de la communauté d'affaires qui ont des intérêts communs liés à Hong Kong et aussi leur permettre d'échanger et de réseauter. Donc, si vous souhaitez avoir plus d'informations, je vous invite à aller visiter leur site web. Puis, je vais également partager une diapositive là, sur l'association après ma conclusion. Donc, au nom d'Investissement Québec International et de l'Association commerciale Hong Kong Canada, je vous remercie d'avoir été des nôtres et je remercie à nouveau nos conférenciers d'aujourd'hui. Alors, merci et à la prochaine.
Thank you, everybody. Merci. Thank you for taking part.
Thank you.
Have a
All right, thank you, guys.
afternoon.